Hey guys, happy Tuesday. I hope you had an amazing weekend. Today I want to talk a little bit about our writing. You should have your introduction, you should have your body paragraphs pretty much figured out since we had those basically done in our outline. We're just kind of making them sound better and putting them into paragraph form. So today what I want to do is talk about conclusions. Before I do that, just a reminder that for your rough draft, your editorial and your letter, those are a normal rough draft. Your speech and your documentary, if you picked one of those two, your rough draft is your script for your speech or your documentary. So you don't need to turn any recordings in tomorrow of your speech or your documentary. I should just see the script. Your final draft will be the actual movie or speech. So if you're confused on that, please let me know and I can help figure out where you're stuck. But yeah, you want a script of what your arguments are. You want how you're going to introduce it, how you're going to close your speech or your documentary. You want all of that figured out in a script format. So make sure that you have that. All right, let's talk about conclusions. So like we talked about with our literary analysis essays, conclusions can do several things. They can emphasize your main point. They can summarize your support, like your evidence and your reasoning. And they can leave your reader thinking deeply or feeling strongly about your message. For an academic essay, which is like our literary analysis or like on a standardized test like the SAT or the iLearn or something of that nature, you're going to want to use that standard conclusion that we talked about with our literary analysis, where you restate your thesis and then you summarize your main points and then you leave the reader with a takeaway. That is a perfectly valid form of a conclusion, but with argumentative writing, when we're being a little bit more real world and a little bit less standardized test style, we can do a few different things. And so we really want to focus on leaving our reader thinking deeply or feeling strongly about our message. That's going to be our main objective with our conclusion. So rather than our main objective being like, sum everything up, our main objective is to really leave our reader thinking deeply or feeling strongly, or both if we can do it. That will probably include emphasizing our main point and potentially summarizing some of our support. But our goal is going to be to get our readers thinking, or listeners, our audience, thinking deeply or feeling strongly about our message. So there are some different ways we can do that. We can end with a passionate push, so we can sort of state our claim really strongly and, tell people what we think again. We can end with a story or a quote that highlights our main point or that kind of suggests to our audience that they consider our main point. Or we can end with a straightforward call to action, like what people should do now that they've listened to our speech or read our letter or read our editorial or watched our documentary. Okay, so let's look at a few options or a few examples that sort of do one or two of these things. So this is the end of that article from last week about the video game industry. And it ends with sort of a story or a quote, like a little anecdote. So it says, some regulations are taking place on a smaller scale. In Menlo Park, California, Michelle DeWolf banned her 10-year-old son, Austin Newman, from playing games during the school week. Originally, she gave him 30 minutes a day, but that didn't work. He couldn't think about doing his homework. He couldn't think about walking the dog or helping in any other way, because he couldn't get his mind off the idea that he had 30 minutes coming, she says. Once he knew there was nothing, he didn't think about it during the week, and he almost, maybe I'm not objective, but he almost seemed relieved. So rather than ending by saying, like, because you've seen all of these things, now you know that video games can sometimes be harmful, which is kind of our normal conclusion. This author ended their article with this sort of little story about this mom taking away video games and this kid, at least in her opinion, being relieved. So this leaves us really thinking about whether he was relieved and thinking about, like, well, if he was relieved, like, maybe video games were harming him. And maybe some regulation by parents or by whoever is necessary for people to be healthy and happy. So we kind of gets us thinking about it, because it's sort of telling us something, but it's not just saying this is the only way it is. It's leaving it very open so we can think about it. So it definitely gets me thinking, and that's what we want out of a conclusion. All right, let's look at the next one. So this is from the end of the editorial example that's about colleges not taking grades this semester because of coronavirus. So they've been talking about different opinions on it and different things that people are saying, and this is how they ended their article. The MIT iteration is pass/no record, meaning that if a student fails a course, it is wiped from the record, with a note placed in transcripts indicating that the semester was subject to a significant disruption, as context to medical, law, business, and other schools. The reality is that the performance of students this semester is not only going to reflect the mastery of a subject, Professor Danheiser said, but also could be impacted by differences between students due to their different health situations, the health of their loved ones, different access to technology, different home situations. We felt it would be unfair and not equitable, he said, to try to proceed under the conditions of this global crisis with business as usual. So this ending is similar to the one before, where it sort of leaves us thinking with this kind of quote from a person who has reason to be talking about the topic we're talking about. We're definitely now thinking about equity. So even though throughout the article this author talked about both sides, they sort of mentioned, like, well, this student's going to be upset if they don't get a grade, but these people say this. They left us with this idea that, like, it just wouldn't be okay to do this. It just would be unfair. It would be inequitable. So that leaves us thinking about that equity, about that, like, equality. Is it fair for all of the students? So we're left sort of considering that and thinking about that, the author's point there. All right, next one. This one is also from an article about video games. This one is a little bit different than the first two. So this person ended their article saying, "It is time to stop pretending that video games do not have a negative impact on some children. Yes, there can be benefits to playing video games, and the vast majority of individuals who play video games don't have problems. However, for a small group of individuals, video games can be extremely problematic, interfering with the ability to function in the real world. The evidence suggests it's time to listen a bit more to the World Health Organization on this issue and a little less to the billion-dollar industry with an incentive to keep kids hooked." So this is definitely an example of a passionate push. So this is more of one where this author is laying out exactly what they think, and they are passionately saying, we need to do this. It is not okay. There are problems. We need to listen to the World Health Organization and not an industry making money off of this. So this is definitely an example of a passionate push. It tells us what they think straightforward, and it tells us what we should do. All right, the next one is the end of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. So this one is going to be a little bit different than the other two, but it has some similarities. All right, let's see how it ends. So he just finished that "Let Freedom Ring from here and here, let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi," like the whole "Let Freedom Ring" thing. That is such a well-known part of the speech that comes right before the end. And then the very last paragraph says, "When we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city, We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last. So that is going to be just a really powerful moment. He's got this quote, this callback to a song that many people know, and he's connected it to the rest of his speech. But it's an imagining of the future, an imagining where everyone is free and everyone is truly equal and truly free. So it gets the reader or the listener imagining that world that could be, if we do the things that need to be done, if we do the things that Martin Luther King Jr. was suggesting that we do in 1963. So this definitely leaves us thinking about freedom for all people and leaves us with that very inspirational feeling of like, we can make this world happen. All right, and then the last one I have is from Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech. So he ends his speech about, this is before the American Revolution started, and he is arguing that we need to fight the British, or that the colonists need to fight the British. So he ends his speech saying, "It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." So again, this one sort of leaves us feeling inspired to follow Henry's lead. It's kind of that passionate push at the end to say, people are going to say peace, but this isn't peace. We don't have freedom, and without freedom, we don't have peace. We're already in the fight, so we need to fight for our freedom, is what he's saying. And it leaves us thinking about that final line, like, is freedom worth death? And for Patrick Henry, the answer was yes. And we might feel similarly, I don't know. But we definitely will think about that when we hear those lines. That's why that line is so famous. Because it was the end of the speech, and it's a very powerful ending. Okay, so what I want you to do today is work on your conclusion and continue finishing up the rest of your rough draft if you have some more to do there. Tomorrow, you'll turn that rough draft in. Again, just a reminder that the rough drafts should be written out. They can be in that same document with your outline. Not a problem for your rough draft. For your final draft, if you have a letter or editorial, we'll make it look pretty. But yeah, work on your conclusion. Please let me know if you need any help. All right, guys, have an awesome